Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I don't know where you guys are at, but again, I'm in the Midwest and it's starting to feel a little bit of fall, so this may have to be my last summer make. So with that being said, today we are going to be working on the calls 7116. But before we start, I wanted to congratulate Paula Matson. She is the winner of our 5 patterns from last week. Paula, I know you're going to be watching this video, and I definitely want you to go ahead and email me at alex@masonlifestyle.com just so I can get some information from you and I can mail you these patterns. All right, so M7116, great pattern. I just did this for the first time this time around. I finally had some time to get this done. One thing to note from this pattern, watch out, I think it runs a little large. But the fun thing about this pattern is that the skirt portion of this pattern is cut on the bias. So again, we're gonna start diving into a couple of other types of sewing, just a little bit different, just a touch, a little bit challenging. I wouldn't say really challenging, just kind of doing something a little different so we can try a couple of different things and learn something new. We'll talk a little bit about how to cut your fabric on the bias, what to do when you have fabric on the bias. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi guys, so today we're going to be working on McCall's 7116. It is a dress and this is for woven fabric. Comes in 2 different size ranges, so make sure that you pick the right one. So something to note with this pattern, the skirt portion of this dress is cut on the bias. So what does that mean for you? It means that when you are selecting fabric for a pattern like this, you have to stay away from, for example, one directional prints, or perhaps designs that have like a big flower. Why? Because you are cutting the skirt on the bias. That means at a 45-degree angle. So perhaps the top is going to look great, right, with your print, but then the skirt's gonna be at an angle. So if you have a print that is one direction, then it's going to be slanted and at an angle. So it's not gonna look right. So for this type of dress, you can do like a solid, or you can do some sort of like a print with like a smaller print that is pretty much non-directional, right? It can be either way, just so when you cut the skirt at the bias, then it doesn't look like it's off. So if you, however, want to do the skirt and you really like this fabric and you don't want to cut it on the bias, you can do that, right? But you are going to have to go a size bigger. Again, that is if you are not cutting the skirt on the bias, okay? So again, the skirt portion of this dress, I'm going to be doing View Diaz and Donald. And this portion of the skirt is cut on the bias, and you're going to see it when I show you the actual pattern pieces. It's cut on the bias. So again, pay attention to the fabric you are picking for this, right? Very important. That's why fabric selection is important. And also, if you do not want to cut the skirt on the bias, you can do that. You can go rogue. But if you do that, you have to cut a size larger to account for now that your fabric is not going to be stretching around your body as it would if you cut it on the bias. So let me show you about the pieces you're going to need. So you're going to need pattern piece number 8, and this is the bodice front, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to need pattern piece number 9. And this is the bodice back, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 10. This is the back neck facing, and you're going to cut 1. Again, pay attention to the grain line because this piece is going to be cut on the bias. You're also going to need pattern piece number 12, and these are the sleeves, and you're going to cut 2. And then here is pattern piece number 13, and this is the skirt front, and you're going to cut 1. But see how the grain line is at a 45-degree angle? Again, that means that you're going to be cutting your fabric on the bias. So when you cut your fabric on the bias, I want to make sure that you stay stitch around your skirt. So again, if you stay stitch on the bias, you want to stay stitch from the bottom up. And again, I'm going to remind you about that later on. And again, you're also going to need pattern piece number 14. This is the skirt back. And again, you're also gonna cut this on the bias. So again, pay attention to those grain lines. Go ahead and cut your fabric. Don't forget your notches and any dots that you may need. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so this is piece number 8, and we are going to start by finishing that edge for the facing, right? So if you look at the pattern, piece number 8, you have this full line, and that is going to be your facing. So usually what I like to do, I just like to press that so I know where the facing's going to be. And then I went ahead and finished it in my serger. If you don't have a serger, this is a woven. You can also fold, right? Fold really carefully, and you can stitch. You can also use bias tape and just finish that edge, but you definitely want to finish this edge because again, this is a woven. It's going to unravel on me as it goes, as I keep sewing with it, and also as I wear it. So I definitely want to finish that edge. So go ahead and finish the edge for both pattern pieces number 8. Once you do that, I want you to go ahead and do some gathering stitches, and you have a notch right there, and I want you to stop right where you folded for the facing. Okay, so again, you have a little dot right there, so I want you to do 2 rows of gathering stitches from that dot all the way to that notch. So you're going to do 1 row 1/4 inch from the raw edge, and you're going to do another row 1/2 inch from the raw edge. So you are going to do that on your machine, and that will be the longest running stitch on your machine. On my machine, it's number 5. It could be 4, whatever it is, the longest running stitch, and you are going to leave your threads long because you want to gather, so we have to pull this. So go ahead and do that now for both pieces number 8. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so again, I have piece number 8, and I want to do a long running stitch on my machine, and I'm going to start right where that facing is at, and I want to make sure that I leave my threads long because I want to make sure that I can gather these stitches, that I can gather this portion. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, using the longest running stitch on your machine, and you are going to stop right where that notch is at. Again, pull, going to cut my threads in another row. And again, this is what 2 rows of gathers look like. And again, see my threads, they're long because I want to make sure I can pull on these later on. All right, do that for both pieces number 8. That is the bodice front. All right, guys, so we went ahead and did our gathering stitches, and I'm going to put that off to the side. I'm going to grab piece number 10. This is the back facing, and I'm trying to handle this piece the least amount as possible because, again, this is cut on the bias. So I don't want this thing to stretch all over on me, or it is going to stretch, but I wanted to stretch the least amount possible. So I want you to go ahead and with wrong sides together, okay, with wrong sides together, I want you to fold it. So again, on your pattern, you have a fold line, right? A roll line right there. So I want you to fold it, and I want you to press this, okay? Again, press is put your iron down, you lift, you move the iron, and you bring it down. Don't go like this. If you do that, that back and forth motion is going to stretch your fabric, and we want to minimize that as much as possible. It's going to stretch because it is on the bias and to facing, so we need that piece to do that, but we're trying to get it to stretch the least amount possible. That's why I'm saying that when you cut things on the bias, you want to hold and move those pieces around the least amount possible. So you cut it, you put it off to the side, don't look at it until you have to use it, okay? So again, grab piece number 10. This is the back neck facing, and I want you to, with wrong sides together, I want you to fold it in half, and I want you to press it, okay? Once you do this, I want you to grab your back bodice, and this is a little bit incorrect in the pattern. I want you to grab this piece, right? And I want you to pin. So raw edges together. Okay. And look at that, I'm handling this the least amount possible, and it's already stretching on me. So that's why I'm saying try to handle these pieces the least amount possible, okay? So now I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I want you to start at the center and go right, and again at the center and go left, and again it's going to go on the right side of the fabric, okay? Once we do that, we're going to flip it inside, so go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so we went ahead and stitched our back facing to the back right side of the fabric. Now I want you to go ahead and trim, and then we are going to, once you trim, I want you to press, because we are going to turn this, okay? So again, grab your shears, and or you can use a rotary cutter, and I want you to trim. And make sure that you are not cutting your stitches. Not going to be the end of the world, but again, you would have to start again from the start. Okay, so now that you cut this, I want you to go ahead and turn it, and I want you to press. So go ahead and do that now for your back facing. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and pressed my facing towards the inside, and I want you to stitch as close to that edge. So again, I'm going to get a little closer. I want you to stitch close to the edge as possible, okay? Take your time, go slow. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I went ahead and stitched my facing right as close to that edge. So now I'm going to grab my front bodice pieces, and with right sides together, I am going to pin at the shoulders. But you see how my front bodice is longer? That's where those gathers come in. So I want you to pull those threads so you can gather these pieces. You want to match that right there, and it looks like I'm going to pull a little more on this side. Okay guys, so now you want to go ahead and pin on both sides, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Go ahead and do that now. Attach both of your pieces number 8 to your back bodice, and that is piece number 9. Go ahead and do that now. All right guys, so I went ahead and stitched my shoulders together. Now I want you to grab this self-facing, and I want you to turn it, okay? And I want you to, I'm gonna show you, I want you to pin this, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance, and I pretty much want you to attach it to the back bodice, okay? Once you do that, I want you to trim the seams, and I wanted you to finish them. How is this going to look, okay? So again, you're going to stitch, right? At the back bodice, you're gonna flip that facing and stitch. Then you're going to trim all that seam allowance, and then I want you to press all of this, and then this is what your facing is going to look like. So go ahead and do that now for both shoulders. So I went ahead and finished my front facings, right? So now I'm going to grab my 2 front bodice pieces, and I'm going to do 2 rows of gathering stitches from the small circle to the circle by the facing. So if you have the pattern, right, whatever number that you're cutting, in my case is 22, so I'm going to do 2 rows of gathers from that small dot to this large dot. So again, you're going to leave your threads long, don't backstitch, and you're going to do 2 rows of gathers, one at 1/4 inch from the edge and another one 1/2 inch away from the raw edge. Again, leave your threads long, and you're going to do that for both the left and the right side. So go ahead and do that now. All right guys, so we went ahead and did the gathers on both bodice front pieces. So now I want you to go ahead and stitch the sides together. So go ahead and pin, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And then on the left side, I want you to stitch from that circle all the way to the top, and you're going to leave a gap. Again, right? Here is our pattern piece, right? And on the left side, you have the circle. So I want you to stitch from the circle up to the armhole, and I want you to leave this gap because we have to insert the zipper later on. So go ahead and leave that gap, but go ahead and stitch on both sides. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I went ahead and stitched my bodice sides, and I wanted to show you something. So we are going to be inserting a zipper on the side of our dress later on. So I stitched the top piece, right? So I backstitch, I locked in my stitches, then I left a gap, right? And then I basted these stitches. So I basted these stitches, again, basting, temporary stitches are gonna come out. I didn't even back stitch at all because again, they're temporary stitches. But eventually later on, I'm going to be inserting an invisible zipper on this side. So I wanna make sure that I basted those. So that's a little tidbit. You can do that if you like, or you can just finish the edges and press your seams open, and then you can keep it that way, and then later on you can baste. So that's a little something, kind of like preparing ahead. So now I'm gonna put my bodice off to the side, and I'm gonna grab my sleeves, and that's piece number 12. And the pattern is asking you to do 2 rows of gathering stitches. Again, just like we did for our shoulders and for the lower top piece of our bodice, you're gonna do 2 rows of gathering stitches. These are the longest stitches on your sewing machine. On mine is number 5, and you're going to go from dot to dot. And again, don't forget to leave your threads long. So do that for both of your gathering stitches, or actually for both of your sleeves. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I did my gathering stitches for both of my sleeves, and now in your pattern, you have these pleats, right? So if you ever wonder which way are my pleats gonna go, your pleats are gonna go towards the arrow. Okay, so I put in dots on my sleeve. So again, this is going to meet that dot right there. And this dot is going to meet that dot right there. Okay, so now I'm going to put a pin right here on both sides. And now, right, look at your pattern piece again. And I always leave my pattern pieces as I am sewing just to reference things, right? To reference dots, to reference notches, just to make sure that I am on the right track, okay? So now you see this, it says stitching line. So that's where you're going to stitch, okay? So you have your sleeve like this, right? So there's my other sleeve. So in the back, again, you have that stitching line from dot to dot. So go ahead and make that pleat on both of your sleeves. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Go ahead and do that now for both sleeves. So I went ahead and did the pleats on my sleeves, right? And I went ahead and pressed it. And now I want you to go ahead and find your notches. And I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And I also want to make sure that you press your seams and that you finish your seams, and do that for both sleeves. Again, don't forget to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Go ahead and do that now for both of your sleeves. All right, so now that we have our sleeves, I'm going to go ahead and with right sides together, and I want to match the seams, the underarm seam. Start always there. And then I also want to match those notches. So it's always 2 notches means the back, 1 notch means the front. Make sure they match. If they don't match, something is amiss. Maybe you cut 2 right sleeves or 2 left sleeves, so that is always something to kind of look for. And then also, if you look at your pattern, you have 1, 2, and 3 dots. This center dot, that large dot, is your shoulder seam. So you want to find the dot on your sleeve and the dot on your bodice or your center seam and match that. Right there. So go ahead and pin. And then again, you also have another dot. And there'll be another dot somewhere around here for that side dot right there. You want to match those also. And you really want to match those dots because you have gathers, right? So we have to adjust the gathers. Here's another dot. And I must say that blue fabric with blue dots was not the best idea. Oh, right there. Okay. Sit right there. Right there. So pin. Right. So now I want you to pull on those threads and I want you to adjust your gathers. All right, guys, now I want you to stitch 5/8 of an inch. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And I want you to do this for both sleeves. And I want you to put your sleeve facing down. Why? Because your sleeves are bigger than your armhole. So you want the feed dogs to really help you ease in these sleeves. So again, make sure that you put your sleeve piece towards the feed dogs on your machine and stitch 5/8 of an inch. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so this is what I'm talking about. I want you to put your sleeve portion towards your feed dogs on your machine. So again, you're going to go ahead and start, do a couple of stitches and then back stitch. So I went ahead and attached my sleeves and you know that you did a good job just because your seams are matching on the underarm. I also went ahead and did the hem for my sleeve. I believe the hem on the sleeve is 5/8 of an inch. So just go ahead and finish and then turn up your hem and just stitch. So now, once you've done that, I'm gonna put that off to the side. And now I want you guys to grab your piece 13 and 14. And I am trying to not touch these pieces as much because again, this is the fabric that is cut on the bias. So when you have fabric that a piece like this that you cut on the bias, you want to stay stitch, okay? You want to stay stitch because you want to make sure that this fabric does not stretch on you. So usually we do stay stitch when we are cutting things on the bias, or perhaps we have like a neckline that is rounded or a V-neck. So you definitely want to stay stitch just so that as you are working on your garment, so your fabric is not stretching on you. Okay, it will stretch, but you are going to try your best not to have these stretch on you. So again, these are pieces 13 and 14. So I am going to go ahead and make sure that you guys stay stitch piece 13 and 14. So go ahead and do that now. And if you also want to finish the edge, go ahead and do that. When you are stay stitching, I want you to stay stitch from the bottom and then go up, right, on both sides. And then on where you have your waistline, I want you to go from the sides in. Again, if you go the other direction, you're going to be stretching this. So you want to go from the sides in, from the bottom up. All right, so go ahead and stay stitch both piece 13 and 14. Go ahead and do that now. All right, guys. Now that you stay stitched your sides and also your top, I usually don't stay stitch the hem because I'm going to hem this and obviously it's going to stretch. So I don't bother with stay stitching in the hem. But now I want you to pin, okay? And I want you to use a lot of pins, right? Remember, we are doing a zipper on the left side, so I put 2 pins right next to each other, and I'm going to stitch again from the bottom. Don't forget the back stitch, and I'm gonna go from the top again, bottom to the top, and then again I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. But remember, our zipper is only on the left side and on the right. So again, stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. So go ahead and do that now. If you are moving this to your sewing machine like I am going to, I'm going to try to make sure that this is not hanging off my table, that I am perhaps holding it with my hand. I want to make sure that I am just careful with this because I don't want my pattern pieces to stretch while I am sewing it. So take your time, but be cognizant. Try not to move this too much, right, from your design table to your sewing machine. Just take your time, hold it, carry it, and I will see you back here. So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch again at the start and at the end, and don't forget to leave that opening on the left hand side. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and stitched my skirt front to my skirt back, and now I want you to press open these seams, right? And pressing bias, you want to press. So you open your seam, you lift, right? You press down with your ironing, then you lift, you move on to the next spot, and then you press. Don't go up and down, okay? That's just gonna stretch your fabric. So again, down, move, right? Move your iron and then press. Again, no ironing highway. You want to press and then move your iron and go down. So go ahead and press your seams open and finish your seams. Remember, we are inserting a zipper on the left hand side, so you want to make sure that these seams are finished and that you open them. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I finished the seams on my skirt portion, and since we are going to be installing a zipper, I also basted those seams, right? So you can kind of see through, they pretty much, it's basted in. So now I want you to grab your bodice, and with right sides together, I want you to join the bodice to the skirt. So best thing to do is start with your seams on the sides and just go ahead and pin. There's your notches in the front. So I started in the back because remember we have gathers in the front. So I started in the back, and I am pinning, and I'm using lots of pins because remember your skirt is cut on the bias. And remember we had those gathers, so now is that time that you can adjust your gathers. I want to make sure that I don't mess up my facings, so I'm going to just pin this right here. And remember, you have gathers there too, but you don't want to gather your facing. And remember, these are overlapping. So again, adjust your gathers. And if you want to try this on, you can always baste all of this in and see if you have to adjust your gathers or if you want it to crisscross a little more. You can also do that if it's easier for you. So, and I'm probably going to crisscross this a little bit more. And here is my center. So I crisscross, right? But this one, I feel like it needs a little bit more. So again, just adjust. And pin. So I would suggest that you go ahead and you baste this all the way around, just so you can try your garment on. Again, if you basted the sides, you can always take that take those basting stitches off, so at least you can try this on. So go ahead and do that now. So again, 5/8 inch seam allowance. If you are basting, then you do not have to backstitch, because you want to be able to take those stitches rather quickly. But if you are stitching, then 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Don't forget the backstitch at the start and at the end. But I suggest you try this on and then you baste it in case you need to crisscross your bodice a little more. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys. So I went ahead and attached my top, my bodice to my skirt, and I tried it on. It fits beautifully. Fits so beautifully that I don't want to put a zipper on it, and I'm not going to, but I am going to show you how to do a zipper, because I don't want you thinking that we are not going to do a zipper. So I'm going to do a zipper, but I'm going to do it in a different piece of fabric, and I'm going to explain to you exactly how I would do a zipper for this dress. So I'm going to put this off to the side. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and put that off to the side. So I have my 2 pieces of fabric, right? My bodice. And remember that the top of that dress is pretty much, it's stitched in, and we start about 1.5 inches or 2 inches down. So we can't tackle this the usual way. So some people like to interface this part of the fabric. I'm not going to, because remember, the bottom portion of our dress is cut on a bias, right? So that's going to keep stretching, and obviously we also want to do the hem, so this is all going to keep stretching on us. So I'm not going to interface that part, but you're going to grab your zipper, and I usually like to get a longer zipper. I know Mimi G does it this way. Kennedy King, which is awesome, he also does it this way, and I'm kind of subscribing to that same methodology. So what you want to do is get a longer zipper, and you want to get a longer zipper so you can get this pull out of the way. Okay, so measure where you're going to start putting your pull on your zipper, and go ahead and start there, right? And start there. And usually at the top, I usually like to almost kind of twist it a little bit, just so it looks a little nicer on my garment. And I want to make sure that the center of my zipper is right on the center of my seam. Okay, and I go ahead and I pin one side. And again, I'm pinning this just to my seam allowance. I'm not pinning this to my actual dress. I'm pinning it to the seam allowance. And again, I'm pinning it in. And usually I like to actually go ahead and I like to baste this by hand. I've seen some people that they like to use fabric glue. I have nothing against that. I want to make sure that when I'm doing this, that the zipper is not moving on me, right? So I pin it. And again, as I'm pinning, I want to make sure that my zipper, the center of my zipper is in the center of my seam line. So again, I'm going to go to the other side and then pin. And I like to do it this way because, again, remember, the top of my dress is closed. So I can't be opening the zipper, okay? So again, I'm going to pin. So now that I have this pinned, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to, hold on, I'm going to go ahead because I want to twist this top piece. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to baste it by hand. Some people don't. You don't have to, but I like to baste it by hand. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some thread and I'm going to baste it by hand so I can take these pins when we go to the machine. So go ahead and baste your zipper. Make sure it's aligned and that it's exactly where you want it to. And then you're going to baste it by hand with needle and thread. Go do that now. So I went ahead and basted my seams, right? I basted my seams. And again, I basted them to the seam, right? Kind of like the seam that we have, not to the seam, but the actual seam allowance. Now, I want to talk to you. So we're going to go to the machine and I'm going to show you my invisible zipper foot. If you don't have one of these, it's like, you know how diamonds are a girl's best friend? A zipper foot is our best friend. And this, usually you have to buy this separately because you usually get this zipper foot with your machine. And this is fine. This works too. And we can use this. But this is awesome stuff. So it's an invisible zipper foot. And it is what we are going to use. So, but before we do that, I want you to grab your little clippers and I want you to take out those seams that you basted. Okay, so again, ever so slowly, don't be using your seam ripper here. You want to get your little scissors and you want to open this up. Okay, so again, take off those basted stitches. Take those off. Okay, and you want to just kind of open your zipper up. So keep going and open those stitches up. And then I'm going to meet you in the sewing machine. And again, if my zipper ends here, I'm going to stop my stitches, opening my stitches there. But go ahead and open your stitches from the opening where that pull is at, all the way down here. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I took all my basting stitches out, right? And again, remember the top of my dress is attached. So it's not like I can do the usual split my zipper up. So I'm gonna grab this pull, and this is why we get a longer zipper. And I'm gonna grab this zipper pull, and I'm going to try to get it in there because I'm trying to get this zipper pull out of the way. Get those stitches, but again, get the zipper pull out of the way, okay? So once you have your zipper pull out of the way, I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to tell you how to stitch. So go ahead and do that now. All right, guys, so I have my invisible zipper foot, and I have one of my coils inside that little ridge on my zipper foot. And again, I'm going to do a couple of stitches to start and back stitch. So now I'm going to back stitch and cut my threads, and that is one side, okay? And now I'm going to go for the other side. So same thing again, make sure that you are not stitching on your, make sure that you are not stitching on your dress, because that would be bad, right? And again, a couple of stitches to start, back stitch, back. Okay guys, so you bring your pull back out, right? And again, so there is your zipper, your invisible zipper, okay? So usually I like to just give this a really good press, all right? All right guys, so there is my zipper, right? So, right? And then these basting stitches, just go ahead and just take them out. Just get rid of them. You don't need them anymore. And if your zipper is longer, just go ahead and do a couple of tags back and forth on your machine, and then just cut your zipper to length. So that's why I usually like to get a longer zipper. For the longest time, I was like, no, no, no. Well, guess what? I moved into the get a longer zipper boat. And the reason why I decided not to put a zipper on my dress, it's because this pull is going to be right under my arm. So I didn't want to do that. If I do this dress again, which I most likely will, I am probably going to cut that back bodice piece in two and add a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just so I can go ahead and install my zipper in the back versus on my underarm. So that's a little tidbit again for this. So now that you have your zipper done, and again, take your time. If this is the first time putting on a zipper, just take your time, go slow, okay? So now that your zipper is done, I want you to go ahead and grab your dress and go ahead and do the hem on the sleeves. You also are called out for 2 like 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch buttons. Put those in if you want to, and you're going to have to let your dress hang for 24 hours. Remember, you cut the skirt on this dress on the bias. So you need to let your skirt just hang. If you do your hem before and you just hang it on your closet, when you come back, your hem may be very wavy in different lengths, and you're gonna have to do the hem again. So again, go ahead and hang your dress for 24 hours and then go ahead and do your hem. And I suggest that for your hem that you keep it hanging or try it on and have somebody else measure where do you want that hem and then do the hem. Okay, so that's it, guys. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Give it a thumbs up. And next week, we are going to be pairing patterns with a ready-to-wear fashions that I've seen in the last couple of weeks. So I will see you next week. Bye.